Are you ready for the word?
Yes, sir.
Let's return to Galatians 3. Galatians 3, let's pick back up in verse 23. But before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up into the faith, which should afterwards be revealed. People read that word kept under and they get a negative connotation, and they should not. They've had to be brainwashed to get a negative connotation, because if you look up that word kept means to take and put something under guard so as to protect it. It means that we were guarded and protected by the law. Without it, we would have perished. So the Torah is a good thing.
Yes, sir.
I took a picture this week, walked out in my yard, and I saw this. These are, can y'all see that?
Yeah.
This is our cat, Bert. This is a little chick that we had to rescue out of the pen because its mother died. And Bert is inside, we named him Houdini because he escapes everything we try to put him in. But Houdini is inside a kennel, and I walked around the house and saw Bert laying there. Now, Bert's not having loving thoughts about Houdini, you understand? And so I snapped that picture of him. The kennel is her protection, not her prison.
Right.
Understand that?
Right.
That kennel is protecting Houdini. It's not imprisoning Houdini. People that say the law is bondage don't understand the law. The law is not a prison. The law is our protection. You probably have seen this on Facebook too. Let's put that up there. I hate being confined by this fence. I'm jumping over it. Wait. It's not a fence. It's a guardrail.
Yep.
That's what Torah is.
Right.
Torah is our guardrail. So before faith came, we were kept under the law, shut up into the faith which should afterwards be revealed. So to be kept by the law is a huge blessing.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
It's a great thing. There can be no faith until a person is confronted with Torah. How can you repent if you don't know what you're repenting about?
True.
Right? Go to Romans 2 for just a minute. Romans 2:12. For as many as have sinned without Torah shall also perish without Torah. And as many as have sinned in Torah shall be judged by Torah. Those that have sinned without the law are not given a pass. You see that? Those who sin without the law, what happens to them? They perish. That word means to be utterly destroyed. They're not saying, oh, okay, well, you didn't know. When you sin without the law, you perish. If you sin in the law, what happens? What does it say? You're judged by the law. Well, which condition is better? Both are going to need salvation, and both are going to need deliverance, but which condition is better? Those under the law, those who were keeping the law, at least they have the law showing them their condition and their need of salvation or need of forgiveness. But those who have no idea about the law don't even realize the danger they're in. That's the reason Paul said this in Romans 3. We've mentioned it before. What advantage then has the Jew, or what profit is there of circumcision? Much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of Yahweh. Being kept under the law is a great advantage.
Yes.
If you want to know what an advantage Torah is, go read Psalm 119. It is written to sing the praises of how awesome Torah is. It's the longest chapter in the Bible. Singing the praises of Torah. It begins with these words. Blessed are the undefiled in the way who walk in the Torah of Yahweh. Blessed are they that walk in the Torah of Yahweh. That's the way it begins. It makes this promise at the end of Psalm 119. Great peace have they which love your Torah, and nothing shall offend them. That is, nothing shall cause them to stumble and fall. That is, to become deceived and destroyed, because they are in Torah. Well, again, the point is, being kept under the law is an advantage. It's a protection, not a prison. Now let's move on to verse 24. Wherefore the law was, mark that word, wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto the Messiah, that we might be justified by faith. But after that faith is come, we're no longer under a schoolmaster. For ye are all the children of Elohim by faith in the Messiah, Yeshua. Schoolmaster. It doesn't really matter what we think a schoolmaster is. What matters is what Paul meant when he likened the law to a schoolmaster. He knew what he meant, and we need to know what he meant, not what we think it means. The Greek word here, does anybody remember what it is? We looked at it years ago. You should remember everything that we've ever talked about in years past. Does anybody remember what that Greek word is? Oh, very good. Very good. Pahidegogos. Pahidegogos. This word doesn't actually mean schoolmaster, though a school may or may not be involved in it. The word actually means, would be better translated as a guardian. It is the combination of two Greek words, pais, which is the Greek word for boy, and ago, which means leader. So literally a boy leader. If you look it up in Strong, Strong said that this is a servant, pardon me. Strong says that this is a servant whose job it was to take children to school. Thus it gets translated as schoolmaster. But that is a gross understatement about what a pahidegogos actually did. Thayer's Greek dictionary says this about this word. It gives a greater definition and explanation. Thayer's dictionary says it's a guardian and guide of boys. It adds this note: among the Greeks and among the Romans, the name was applied to trustworthy slaves who were charged with the duty of supervising the life and the morals of boys belonging to the upper class. The boys were not allowed so much as to step outside their house without them before arriving at the age of manhood. The boys could not go out without the pahidegogos going with them. He was supervising that child's life and morals. This was a slave entrusted to care for a young man at all times. He went with him to school, yes, so you could say schoolmaster, but he actually went with him everywhere he went. In an ancient text, it is recorded where a pahidegogos was once asked what his duty was, and his answer was this: my duty is to make the good pleasant to the boy. It is my duty to take that which is good and make it pleasant to the boy. In other words, he taught that boy what to think, what to believe, and how to behave. He went with the boy to school. He was there to hear what was taught in school. Isn't that an interesting concept? He was there to make sure that a teacher whose duty it was to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic didn't fill that boy's head with their own morals and own ethical beliefs. It was okay for the teacher to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. But if that teacher got off trying to instill in that boy something about the way that teacher wanted him to believe, that was not all right. And that pahidegogos was there to correct it. Are you with me? He was there to make sure that the family principles were never overridden by outside influences. What a great concept. Yeah. Try to send someone to sit in your child's class in a public school. They won't allow it because they don't want you to know sometimes the garbage that they're using to try to steal your child's mind away from you. Now, the education system today is no longer focused solely on teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. They are, in all too many cases, focused on producing students whose minds are void of biblical principles. I'm not saying that that's the focus of teachers or that teachers are bad. There's some good ones. We have one in our assembly who's excellent. But I am saying that the education system that these good teachers sometimes have to work in have been hijacked by liberal, godless people with liberal, evil, godless agendas. If there ever was a day that a child needed a pahidegagos, it's the day we live in. A pahidegagos was a brilliant idea that the Greeks and Romans set up for the protection of their values in their children. It was the pahidegagos' duty to teach a young man good morals and good manners. He was there to hear what the young man was taught. He was there to see how the young man interacted with others and interacted with authority. He was there to oversee the boy's development from a child to a man and to make sure that he was a man who shared the exact same characteristics as his dad.
Yeah. Right.
Make sure you understand that. The pahidegagos' duty was to turn the boy into a man who had the same exact characteristics as the dad. Who do you think instructed the pahidegagos? The father did.
Yeah.
The pahidegagos wasn't teaching the boy what he wanted the boy to learn. The pahidegagos was teaching the boy what the father wanted the boy to learn. Are you with me? Yes. He taught the boy the father's instructions. If you're taking notes, write this down. The pahidegagos was put in place by the father to instruct the boy in the father's ways. It was his duty to make sure that no outside influences affected the boy's beliefs, thinking, morals, or manners. With that in mind, listen again to Galatians 3:24. Wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us unto the Messiah, that we might be justified by faith. The law is put in place by the Father to instruct us in His ways. The law's duty is to make sure that no outside influences affect how we think, how we believe, our morals, or our manners. The law teaches us to think like the Father so that we can be brought into a place that we can fellowship with the Father. If someone wants to be saved by grace through faith and have fellowship with YAHWEH, they have to be taught to think, believe, and behave in a certain way. Did that make sense?
Yes.
YAHWEH will not fellowship with someone who chooses to think, believe, and behave differently than he does. Now, you can write that down. That's the truth. We'll look at a very familiar passage. Go to Isaiah 55. This is a passage a lot of people like to quote. Isaiah 55:8. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says YAHWEH. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. You ever heard anybody quote that? Have you ever heard anybody quote that as an explanation for why we don't always understand what YAHWEH does when He does it? Right? You've heard that? Well, you know, His ways are higher than our ways. You know that's not what this verse is saying? To understand what this verse is saying, all you have to do is read the verse that came before the verse they quote. Read verse 7. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. And let him return unto YAHWEH, and He will have mercy upon him, and to our Elohim, for He will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says YAHWEH. Forsake your ways, forsake your thoughts. If they don't line up with my ways and my thoughts, your ways and your thoughts are wrong. Because my ways and my thoughts are high. So you need to forsake your way and come up and start thinking like I think and acting like I act. YAHWEH is not going to fellowship with someone who chooses to think, believe, and behave differently than he does. So Torah is given to us to instruct us on how to think, what to believe, and how to behave. Without Torah, a person does not see the error of the way he thinks, believes, or behaves, and therefore does not see his need of a Savior. You need Torah to even know how much you need to change the way you think. Without Torah, you can be thinking things and not know that the things you're thinking are bad. You can be believing things and not know that the things that you're believing are bad. Let's explore that for just a moment. If somebody thinks that they can be saved by grace and have fellowship with Yahweh and not believe in a 6-day creation, they're deceived. The Father sent Torah, Paul says here, as a pahidegogos, to make sure that we understand how everything came to be. He spoke it into existence. The things that you see were created from things that you don't see. He said, and it was. If you want to believe scientists and professors who say that it's impossible for everything to be created in 6 days, then all I would say to you is, if you're going to believe them over what Torah says, is you better make sure they're capable of standing up for you on the day of judgment and explaining your position on the matter. You cannot call Yahweh a liar and fellowship with Him. You cannot call Yahweh a liar and it go well for you. If you think that you can be saved by grace through faith and have fellowship with Yahweh, but you also have this belief that different cultures can worship different Elohims who they call by different names, and then what you're doing in that situation is once again contradicting Yahweh. Yahweh said, "You have no Elohim before me." Let me say it this way. There's only one Elohim who created all things. There's only one Elohim who gave His only begotten Son. There's only one Elohim before whom man will stand on the great day of judgment and give an account, and His name is Yahweh. If somebody thinks they can be saved by grace and have fellowship with Yahweh while they cherish possessions such as crucifixes, graven images, steeples, and the likeness, they've been deceived. In their minds and hearts, a person can rationalize that those things have deep spiritual meaning for them. But Torah teaches us to think, believe, and behave better than that. Torah teaches us to think, believe, and behave like Yahweh. Until Torah, I did not know those things were bad. But Yahweh hates those things. He forbids all graven images, all likenesses. And the word all means all of them. If somebody thinks they can be saved by grace through faith and have fellowship with the Father and have no desire to know His name, or worse yet, decide that it's okay to call upon Him using names and titles that He even forbids that He be called by, they're deceived. 6,823 times Yahweh put His name in the Masoretic text. It's alarming that the translators of today chose to replace His name with a title or a generic word. Yahweh said to Moses in Exodus 3:15, "Thus shall you say to the children of Israel, Yahweh, Elohim of your fathers, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, Elohim of Jacob, has sent me unto you. This is my name forever. This is my memorial unto all generations." It's amazing to me how many teachers and preachers will stand up and say, well, Moses asked Yahweh His name, and Yahweh said, well, I am that I am. And that just means He is whoever we need Him to be, and blah, blah, blah. They go on with this teaching, and they never read the next verse. In verse 15, He plainly said, Yahweh, the Elohim of your fathers, sent me. Yahweh is His name forever. Yahweh is His name, which is a memorial unto all generations. Without the name, He gets forgotten. That's the reason He said, this is my memorial unto all generations. That name is a memorial. No wonder the enemy wants the name forgotten. 6,823 times it's in the original text. You don't find it at all in our translations today. The enemy wants that name forgotten. Go do a study. When Yahweh fought against his enemies, he would say of them, I will wipe out their remembrance. Same word translated memorial here. I will wipe out their remembrance. And what he was saying is, I will erase their names from existence. And when I erase their names, they'll cease to exist. Yahweh says, my name is my memorial. Yahweh is my name to all generations. Yahweh is the name by which I will be remembered. No wonder the enemy doesn't want us to know that name. He commanded us to not use certain titles. He said, don't call me Lord. He said, Lord is the way they address Baal or Baal. He said, don't call me by that name. And yet, that's the name they chose to put in great big capital letters throughout our translations. And Yahweh said, don't dare call me that. So I'm saying you can't walk around doing that knowingly and have fellowship with the Father. Listen, if you're married and you're calling your spouse by somebody else's name, it's not going to go well. Y'all didn't like that illustration. But it's true. You're not going to stay in tight fellowship by calling them somebody else's name. And here, Yahweh said, in the scriptures, Yahweh said, Baal is called Lord, don't you dare call me that. If someone thinks, I'll move on. If someone thinks they can be saved by grace and have fellowship with Yahweh and not believe that the seventh day is sacred, they've been deceived. Over and over again, Yahweh refers to the importance of us remembering the seventh day and keeping it holy, set apart, lifted up. He said it's a sign between us and Him. Those who would walk in fellowship with Yahweh must agree with Him about the seventh day. When you say no day is more important than any other day, no day is more holy than any other day, you just disagreed with Yahweh. Yahweh said the seventh day is sanctified, and man says, no, it's not every day sanctified. How can you have fellowship with Him and argue with Him like that? You cannot disagree with Him and fellowship with Him. You can go back and read Isaiah 55. Yahweh said, your thoughts are not my thoughts. So let the wicked man forsake his thoughts and forsake his ways. Because when you're thinking and you're acting opposite of what Yahweh said that's wicked. There are people, you watch what I'm telling you when this gets posted to YouTube. There are people who are going to take great offense because I've said that a person who thinks they can be saved by grace and have fellowship with Yahweh and not believe in the sacredness of the seventh day, when I say they're deceived, there are people who are going to be offended that I say that. But they will be offended not because I'm wrong. Instead, they'll be offended because they have been deceived into believing that as long as you have said a prayer, you can be saved. They'll be offended because they're not willing to consider how important it is that you repent to be saved. And they're going to be offended because they do not understand that repent means you got to change the way you think, way you believe, and the way you behave. Amen. And until you change the way you think, believe, and behave, you haven't really accepted the Lordship of Yeshua, and you're not yet saved. You cannot have fellowship with Yahweh and tell Him that His seventh day is not holy. You can deceive yourself into believing you're having fellowship, but you better try the spirits. You cannot have fellowship with Yahweh and tell Him that you'd rather honor a day that Constantine elevated than a day that he elevated.
Right.
I'm going to follow Constantine instead of you, but I'm still going to look for you to save me on the day of judgment. You can't do that.
Right.
I'm going to trust what Constantine said about the first day of the week instead of what you said about the seventh day of the week. But every time I'm in trouble, I'm still going to look to you for fellowship and help. Right. You can't do that. Whew. Do you believe that you could be a murderer who continues to murder and have fellowship with Yahweh? No. Do you believe that you could be a thief who continues to steal and have fellowship with Yahweh? Then why would someone believe that they can continue to ignore the first 4 commandments and have fellowship with Yahweh?
True. Right.
Torah is our pahidegogos to make that which is good pleasant to us. Now we could go on with illustration after illustration. Torah teaches us that there were giants in the earth. Torah teaches us that there's a different seed in the earth that fights against the seed of man in the earth. Torah teaches us that Yahweh sent 10 plagues upon Egypt in order to deliver His people. Torah teaches us that Yahweh divided the Red Sea by a strong wind. You believe there are people standing in pulpits who no longer believe that? Torah teaches us that Yahweh fed the children of Israel with manna 6 days a week for 40 years. Torah teaches us that Yahweh spoke with Moses face to face. Torah teaches us that Yahweh destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of their wickedness. Torah teaches us that homosexuality is unacceptable behavior by any society. Torah teaches us that He has 7 yearly appointed times that we're to observe with all diligence, which are His ordinances forever. So if a person chooses to believe differently than those things that Torah lays out, they cannot hold on to those thoughts and those beliefs and still think they can walk in fellowship with Yahweh. Before we go back and take a closer look at verse 24, let me add this. We're talking about how important that Torah is and that it serves as a pahidegogos to make sure we think, believe, and behave in the correct ways. To those of you with young children, I would say you may not be able to hire a pahidegogos to guard your children day and night. But you can teach them Torah. And you can teach them to meditate therein day and night. And Yahweh promises that He'll take that instruction and He'll write it in their hearts and He'll put it in their minds. You can work with Him to make sure that your children know what is written in Torah, which does no good unless you also make sure they know that what's written in Torah came straight from Yahweh. And it's His instruction on how to think, believe, and behave. And if you properly instruct them in Torah, no man will ever be able to convince them to believe the lies of philosophy, science, or humanism. Amen. Torah will stand guard over their hearts and minds. And we not only have the promise of that, but Yeshua promises that the Ruach HaKodesh will come in and bear witness of the truth. And they'll hear things and they will know, even as a child, that's not right. And they'll hear things and the Ruach HaKodesh speak up and say, that's truth. And they will accept it. Make sure they know what Torah is and how to hear the Ruach HaKodesh. Now go back to verse 24. Wherefore Torah was our schoolmaster to bring us unto the Messiah that we might be justified by faith. So now we're getting a better understanding of what he meant by schoolmaster, a pahidegogos. But let's break the verse down just a little bit now. Torah is our schoolmaster into the Messiah is what it actually says. You see the words to bring us is in italics, which means it was not there in the original language, so they added it. They add stuff where they ought not add stuff. It doesn't say it was our schoolmaster to bring us unto the Messiah. It says it was our schoolmaster to bring us unto or in. It's the school, let me rephrase it. Torah is our schoolmaster into the Messiah is what it actually said. Torah is our guardian to the Messiah. Torah is how Yahweh guides us to Messiah, is what it's saying. Torah is Yahweh's instruction to us that if we want to fellowship with Him, we're going to have to be justified by faith. Torah is Yahweh's instruction to us that if we're going to fellowship with Him, we are in need of being justified by faith. So Torah carries us to Yeshua. In other words, Torah is never going to instruct a man, if you'll just do better, you'll be okay. Torah will take a man to Yeshua so that he can be saved by grace. Those who follow Torah are not getting away from salvation by grace. They are not. Those who are following Torah understand what salvation by grace through faith is. Okay? Torah brings us to the Messiah. Torah is where we learn what sin is. Torah is where we learn that without the shedding of blood there is no remission of sins. Torah brings us to the Messiah. So how can a church that eliminates Torah bring anyone to the true Messiah for salvation? And the answer is they can't. Let's move on to verse 25. We're not through with verse 24, but let's move on to verse 25 and we'll come back. But after that faith has come, we're no longer under apahidegogos. For you are all the children of Yahweh by faith in the Messiah Yeshua. So, let me ask you this. Does verse 25 mean that Torah is now eliminated? Man eliminates it, but the Scriptures never do. Go to Romans 3 and let's look at another statement by Paul. Who wrote Galatians?
Paul.
Okay. So let's go look at another statement by this same man. Romans 3, look in verse 31. Do we then make void the law through faith? Yahweh forbid. Yea? We do what with the law? We establish the law. Make void, kartagio in the Greek, kartagio, means render something idle. Strong says it means to do away with, to take something, to put it away or to put it down. So the question is, do we do away with the law through faith? What's the answer? No. How more simple can it get? Do we do away with the law through faith? No. Do we put it away? No. Do we render it idle? No. Yahweh forbid. The word translated establish means to cause something to stand, to cause it to continue, and to hold it up. So, the question is, do we then do away with the law through faith? Yahweh forbid. Yea, we cause it to continue to stand. We uphold it. Now the man who by the inspiration of the Ruach HaKodesh wrote those words cannot now turn around and tell the Galatians, well, we're not under the law anymore. Right. He said through faith we cause the law to stand.
Right.
If you think that he said in Galatians 3:25 we're no longer under the law, you misunderstood him. Before faith came, but after that faith has come, verse 25, we're no longer under a schoolmaster. For you are all the children of Yahweh by faith in the Messiah Yeshua. To understand what Paul said, we need only to consider two things. First of all, we need to understand the actual wording he used in verse 24. And we need to understand the actual analogy that he used in verse 24. So we'll go back to verse 24 and let's look at the wording. Again, to bring us is in italics. Should not have been added. Let's look at the word was. Interlinear Greek Bible. Look at the tense of that verb used. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. But the interlinear Greek Bible says that this Greek word should have been translated has become instead of was. And the New American Standard translates it that way. Wherefore Torah has become. A lot of difference between has become and was.
Yes.
Wherefore Torah has become our pahidegagos into the Messiah, that we might be justified by faith. Torah has become a guardian and protector of all who will read it. Torah has become the guardian to direct them to Messiah. Torah has become the guardian to direct them to Messiah, that they might be justified by faith. It has become that. It's not that it was, it is and always will be that. It's still necessary today. If you're going to take a man that is lost, he needs to be directed to the Messiah. It is only Torah that can actually do that, or a man who understands Torah. All right. Do you remember what Yeshua said to those who followed the Jews' religion when they were angry with him in John chapter 5? That he had healed a man on the Sabbath day and told him, take up his bed and walk. And they get into this terrible condemnation of him. And Yeshua said this in John 5:45, finally, frustrated with them, he said this to them. John 5:45, do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There is one that accuses you, even Moses, in whom you trust. For had you believed Moses, you would have believed me, for he wrote of me. But if you believe not his writings, how shall you believe my words? What did Moses write? He wrote Torah. What's Torah about? Yeshua said, well, it's all about me.
Yeah.
In order to follow the Greek Jesus instead of the true Messiah, you have to eliminate Torah. Let that sink in. In order to follow the Greek Jesus instead of the true Messiah, you have to eliminate Torah. In order to follow the true Messiah, you have to know Torah. Torah reveals to you the true Messiah. Torah has become the guardian into the Messiah. So to know that verse 25 is not telling us that the law is no longer of value, look at the wording. Torah wasn't the schoolmaster. Torah has become the schoolmaster. This difference in translation shows us that Torah still fulfills that function in this day. It still is a schoolmaster bringing folks into Yeshua. The second thing we have to do is follow the analogy that Paul used. Paul's point was that Torah has become our trainer into the Messiah, that we might be saved. Once faith has come, that function, that particular function of the pahidegagos is no longer needed. That particular function. What particular function? To bring you to Yeshua, that you can be saved by grace through faith. Do you need to be saved by grace through faith every day? See? That particular function is no longer needed. We are now in Messiah, and Paul said there in verse 26, we are the children of Yahweh. You should not need Torah to convince you every day that Yeshua is the Messiah. Torah as a pahidegagos should have already fully convinced you He is the Messiah, and that's the reason you put your faith in Him. Right? Once faith has come, you have accepted that as truth. That function of Torah to get you to Yeshua is complete. Now that does not mean then that now Torah is eliminated. Yahweh forbid. Think about the analogy for a moment. The pahidegagos did not teach the child his instruction. We said that earlier. He taught the child whose instruction? The Father. Once the pahidegagos turn the child over to the Father, does the instruction then go away? The boy is now in constant contact with the giver of the instruction. The boy will now see all that instruction fleshed out by observing his father every day. Follow the analogy. How foolish would it be for this young boy who has now stepped over into manhood, who is now stepping in to walk day by day with his dad, how foolish would it be for that young man to say to his dad, I sure am glad that I get to hang out with you every day now, and that we don't have to follow those crazy rules of that pahidegagos that used to make me follow those things every day. I'm glad I don't have to do what he said anymore. I'm glad I'm hanging out with you. You see how stupid that'd be? Those rules were not crazy. Those rules came from the Father. And if that boy's going to fellowship with the Father, he's going to have remembered them, embraced them, and walk in them. That's the reason the Father put the servant with him. And so that when he became a man, he would be a man that the Father could fellowship with. Come on.
Yep.
More than one dad has raised a child improperly to the place that they can't fellowship with one another.
Right. Right.
That's true.
Or not maybe the dad, let's don't put all the blame on the dad. Sometimes children just reject the instruction of the Father. And they can't fellowship with one another. Are you with me? In order to fellowship with one another, they got to think alike,
Right.
believe alike, and behave alike. Right? The instruction does not cease to exist. The instruction gets intensified when the pahidegagos pulls back. Right?
Yep.
It's intensified now. If a man is lost, he needs to read Torah. It will protect him from daring to believe that he's not lost. But if a man is saved, he needs to read Torah. And when he does, he will find an inner voice agreeing with what he is reading and confirming those things to him, that this is how you, as a child of Yahweh, this is how you're to think, this is what you're to believe, and this is how you're to behave.
Yes.
Torah protects a lost man and leads him to Yeshua. Torah pulsates within a saved man as he learns to yield to Yeshua, who now lives and resides on the inside of him. Torah is not made void. Torah is established in the hearts of the children of Yahweh, as Paul said in Romans 3. Verse 27, for as many of you have been baptized into the Messiah, have put on the Messiah. Boy, let's take verse 27 and tie it back to verse 25. For as many of you have been baptized into the Messiah, have put on the Messiah. Can a person be so deceived as to actually believe that they can put on Messiah and refuse to keep Torah? The answer to my question is yes, they can be that deceived, but it is deception. What was you saying, Steve?
They have been that deceived.
They have been that deceived. And verse 27 says we put on Yeshua. How can you put on Yeshua and not have a driving desire to learn, keep, and do Torah? It's absurd to even consider that now that I put him on, I don't have to do it. There is neither, verse 28, there's neither Jew nor Greek, there's neither bond nor free, there's neither male nor female, for you are all one in the Messiah Yeshua. All of us are exactly the same. By that I mean we all are saved by grace through faith, no matter who we are. Living according to the instruction of the Father. The Greeks may not have known about this instruction as long as the Jews had known about it. But the Greeks are required to learn it, keep it, and do it just like the Jews had to learn it. And if you be the Messiahs, then are ye Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. And this means that everything that Abraham was promised to inherit through his seed, which is Yeshua, we now become joint heirs and seed also. Hallelujah. So we are brought into those covenant promises. I want to close by showing you one more picture. I showed you a picture of Houdini being protected by the kennel. And the reason that it's necessary for Houdini to be protected by the kennel is because Houdini lost her mother, his mother. I don't know if Houdini's a boy or a girl. But nonetheless, he lost his mother. A kennel protects that chick, but it's not the best protection for the chick. The best protection for the chick is that right there.
Yeah.
You look in her eyes. You don't want to mess with her. She don't care how small she is and how big you are. You do not want to mess with her. Yes, Torah is our pahidegagos. And when you're lost, you need Torah to protect you and lead you to the Messiah. Without it, you'd not know who, what, when, where, or why about salvation. You would know nothing about salvation. But when you're saved, you get the giver of Torah dwelling on the inside of you, and that's better. Yeah. It doesn't eliminate the written Torah, but now it's written in our hearts and in our minds. It's not eliminated, it's intensified. The point Paul is making is simple. A lost man needs Torah to find the Messiah. A saved man has the giver of Torah now as his father and is clothed with the Yeshua who knows exactly how to keep Torah. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. As his name is put upon you, so shall he bless you.